Kyle Bennett stood at the viewport of the transport ship and watched as Nexus Prime grew larger against the stars. Station was massive, a spinning wheel of metal and light where dozens of alien species lived and worked together. Somewhere inside that station was the Valoran Embassy, and that was where Kyle would spend the next 2 years of his life. He was nervous, but he did not let it show on his face. He was only 26 years old, young for a diplomatic attach, and he knew that many people had doubted whether he was ready for this assignment, but Kyle had worked hard to get here. He had studied alien languages and customs for years. He had practiced patience and calm until they became second nature. Now he would prove that he belonged. The transport docked with a gentle bump, and Kyle gathered his small bag of belongings. They did not bring much. Humans never did. Their lives were short compared to most species in the galaxy, and Kyle had learned early that experiences mattered more than possessions. Ambassador Linda Grant met him at the docking bay. She was a tall woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been working with the Valorans for 15 years, longer than any other human diplomat. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," she said, shaking his hand firmly. "I hope you're ready for a challenge." "I am," Kyle said. "Good. Because the Valorans are not easy to work with. They live for 300 years, and they think that makes them better than everyone else, especially us." She started walking, and Kyle fell into step beside her. "The royal family is here for the next few months. The king wants his daughter to learn about diplomacy, so she'd be working with our delegation." Princess Valor. Kyle said he had studied the files on the transport. "You've done your homework. That's good. Just remember that she's been raised to think humans are barely worth noticing. Don't take it personally." Kyle nodded. He had heard the stories. To the Valorans, humans were newcomers to the galactic stage. They were weak, short-lived, and primitive. The fact that humans had spread across dozens of worlds in just a few centuries meant nothing to a species that had been traveling the stars for 10,000 years. The Valoran Embassy was beautiful in a cold way. The walls were made of pale blue stone that seemed to glow from within. The ceilings were high, and everything was designed to make visitors feel small. Kyle kept his back straight and his expression calm as Ambassador Grant led him through the halls. They found Princess Vali in the main conference room, studying a holographic display of trade routes. She was tall and slender with silver hair that fell past her shoulders and eyes the color of pale amethyst. Her skin had a faint blue tint like all Valorans, and she moved with the grace of someone who had never known a moment of awkwardness in her entire life. She looked up when they entered, and her eyes passed over Kyle like he was furniture. "Ambassador Grant," she said. Her voice was musical but cold. "I see you have brought another human. This is Kyle Bennett, your Highness. He'll be working with our delegation as a junior attach." Vali's gaze finally settled on Kyle. She studied him the way a scientist might study an insect. "How old are you?" 26. "Your Highness." 26. She said the number like it was something sad. "Already a quarter of your life gone. Tell me, human, do you ever wonder why your species bothers reaching for the stars when you die so quickly?" Kyle felt the sting of her words, but he did not let it show. He had expected this. "Perhaps it is because we know our time is short." That we value every moment of it, Your Highness. Something flickered in Valeria's eyes, surprise maybe, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold dismissal, pretty words from a dying species. I suppose that is all you have to offer. She turned back to her display, and Kyle understood that he had been dismissed. Ambassador Grant touched his arm and led him out of the room. You handled that well, she said quietly. She's testing me, Kyle said. She's testing everyone. She doesn't believe humans have anything valuable to teach her, and she resents being forced to work with us. Her father ordered this assignment because he wants peace between our peoples. Valera thinks peace with humans is a waste of time. Kyle spent the next few weeks proving himself. Through quiet work, he arrived early and stayed late. He learned the names of every guard and servant in the embassy. He practiced his Valorian language skills until he could hold simple conversations. He studied the customs and protocols until he knew them as well as any human alive. Valera noticed none of it, or if she did, she gave no sign. She continued to treat Kyle like he was invisible, speaking past him in meetings and ignoring his contributions to discussions. When she did acknowledge him, it was only to make cutting remarks about human limitations. At it, formal dinner was held to celebrate the upcoming diplomatic summit. Dozens of species were represented, and Kyle stood near the back of the human delegation. Watching and learning, he saw how different species greeted each other, how alliances were formed and broken with a glance or a word. Then Valeria approached the human table, her brother, Prince Kalen, at her side. Kalen was young by Valoran standards, barely 30, with curious eyes and a kinder face than his sister. I have a question for the humans, Valor announced, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. I have always wondered why your species clings so desperately to relevance. You live for less than a century. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. What makes you think you belong among the stars? The room grew quiet. Other species were watching now, curious to see how the humans would respond. Kyle stepped forward before Ambassador Grant could speak. He knew he was risking his position, but something told him this moment mattered. Your Highness, he said calmly, you ask what makes humans think we belong among the stars. The answer is simple. We belong because we choose to. We were not given long lives, so we learned to make every day count. We were not given strength, so we learned to work together. We were not given natural weapons, so we built tools and ships and reached for worlds that should have been forever beyond our grasp. He paused, meeting her amethyst eyes without flinching. We are here because we refuse to accept that we could not be. I think that is enough. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Prince Kalen smiled, but Valera's expression remained cold, desperate. Philosophy, she said quietly, but philosophy will not save you when real danger comes. She turned and walked away, but Kyle noticed that she glanced back at him once before disappearing into the crowd. That night, intelligence reports arrived at the embassy. There was a credible threat against the Valoran royal family. Someone was planning an attack at the upcoming summit. And Kyle Bennett had no idea that his chance to prove himself was coming far sooner than he expected. The water world of Cas IV was beautiful in a way that made Kyle's heart ache. The diplomatic summit was being held in a floating city that drifted across an endless blue ocean. Towers of white coral rose from platforms of living crystal, and the air smelled of salt and strange flowers. Kyle stood on a balcony and watched the sunset paint the clouds in shades of orange and purple. He had been on the planet for 3 days now, and his duties kept him busy from morning until night. The summit had brought together representatives from over 40 species, and the human delegation was working hard to strengthen their position in the galactic community. Kyle translated documents, arranged meetings, and handled dozens of small tasks that no one else wanted to do. He did not complain. He never complained. He simply did the work and did it well. Princess Valeria continued to ignore him, but Kyle noticed that something had changed since the dinner on Nexus Prime. She still treated him with cold dismissal, but sometimes he caught her watching him. When she thought he was not looking, he did not know what to make of it, so he focused on his duties and waited. The change came on the 4th day of the summit. Prince Kalen had wandered away from his guards, as young princes often did, and found himself in conversation with a delegate from the Vraxian Empire. The Vraxians were a proud warrior species, easily offended and quick to violence. Kyle saw the conversation happening from across the room and noticed the way the Vraxian delegate's face was darkening with anger. He moved without thinking, crossing the room with quick steps and arriving just as Kalen was about to say something that would have been considered a deadly insult in Vraxian culture. Prince Kalen, Kyle said, smoothly, stepping between them with a bow to the Vraxian. The ambassador requires your presence for an important matter. Please forgive the interruption. Honored delegate. The Vraxian studied Kyle with suspicious eyes, but the human's respectful bow and careful words had diffused the tension. The delegate nodded once and walked away. Kalen looked confused. What did I do wrong? Among the Vraxians, asking about family lineage before the 3rd meeting is considered an accusation of false heritage. It's a killing offense on their home world. The young prince's blue skin went pale. I did not know. That's why we study these things, Kyle said gently, so that misunderstandings don't become tragedies. Kalen stared at Kyle with new respect. You saved me from making a terrible mistake. Why did you help me? Kyle smiled. Because it was the right thing to do. Word of the incident reached Valero within the hour. That evening she found Kyle alone in one of the smaller gardens, practicing phrases in the clicking language of the Colonian species. You helped my brother today, she said without greeting. Kyle stood and bowed. I did what anyone would have done, Your Highness. No, that is not true. She stepped closer, her amethyst eyes searching his face. Most humans would have let a Valoran prince embarrass himself. It would have weakened our position and strengthened yours. That is how politics works. Maybe, but Kalen is young and he did not know. Letting him suffer for an honest mistake would have been cruel. Cruel. Valeria said the word like she was tasting it. Humans talk about cruelty as if it matters more than power, doesn't it? She had no answer for that. Instead, she asked another question. What is your angle, human? What do you want from my family? Everyone wants something. Kyle thought about his answer carefully. I want to build something that lasts longer than I do. Humans don't live long, Your Highness. We know that. Everything we build, every relationship we form will continue without us, so we try to build things that matter. Friendships, alliances, peace, and you. expect nothing in return. I expect to die someday knowing that I made things a little better than I found them. That's enough for me." Valor was silent for a long moment. The garden was quiet except for the distant sound of waves. "You are strange, Kyle Bennett. I do not understand you. Maybe that's a start." She left without another word, but Kyle noticed that she had used his name for the first time. Over the next few days, Valera began watching Kyle more openly. She saw how he learned greetings in every language, how he remembered the names of servants and guards that even she did not know. She saw how he treated everyone with the same quiet respect, whether they were ambassadors or cleaners. One afternoon she found him teaching Kalen a human game with a small ball and a cup. The young prince was laughing, a sound that had become rare since their mother's death 3 years ago. "Where did you learn to work with children?" she asked. Kyle's smile faded slightly. "I had a younger sister. Her name was Emma. She was curious about everything just like Kalen was. She got sick when she was 12. The illness took her before the doctors could find a cure." Kyle's voice was steady, but there was old pain in his eyes. "After she died, I promised myself that I would protect curious children whenever I could, because someone should." Valeria did not know what to say. She had never heard a human speak about loss so openly. In Valoran culture, grief was private, hidden away where no one could see it, but Kyle spoke about his sister like her memory was a gift rather than a wound. "I am sorry for your loss," she said finally. "Thank you." He smiled, and it was genuine. She would have loved this place, all this water and those strange singing fish. She would have tried to catch one. Valera almost smiled. Almost. That night she lay awake, thinking about Kyle Bennett and everything she had been taught about humans. They were supposed to be primitive, emotional, and weak, but Kyle was none of those things. He was patient and kind and brave in a quiet way that she was only beginning to understand. Maybe she had been wrong about humans. The thought was still in her mind when the explosion shook the building. The blast threw Pola from her bed. Alarm screamed through the halls, and the lights flickered red. She grabbed her emergency beacon and ran toward her brother's room, heart pounding in her chest. The corridor was chaos. Guards were running, weapons drawn, shouting orders in different languages. Valor pushed through them and found Kellen's room empty, the door hanging from its hinges. Panic seized her throat. Where was her brother? Then she heard Kyle's voice, calm and clear through the chaos. "This way, Your Highness. I have the prince." She followed the sound and found Kyle in a side corridor. Kalen clutched against his chest. The young prince was frightened but unharmed. Behind him, 2 Valoran guards lay dead on the floor. "Assassins," Kyle said. "They came for your family. We need to move now." Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. Through a shattered window, Valor saw ships descending from the sky, bearing the colors of High Counselor Dreth, the old noble who had always whispered that peace with other species was weakness. The one who believed Valorans should rule the galaxy alone. "Traitor," she whispered. "We can discuss politics later," Kyle said. "Right now we need to survive." He grabbed her hand with his free arm and pulled her into the darkness of the maintenance tunnels. Behind them, the summit burned in. Valera realized that everything she thought she knew was about to change forever. The maintenance tunnels were dark and narrow, lit only by emergency strips. That glowed a faint blue. Kyle moved through them with Kalen in his arms, and Valor closed behind. The young prince was shaking, but he stayed quiet, understanding somehow that silence might save their lives. Kyle had memorized the layout of the summit complex during his first day on Kalos 4. It was a habit he had developed years ago, back when he first started working in dangerous places. Know the exits, know the hiding spots, know how to disappear when everything goes wrong. That knowledge was saving their lives. Now behind them, they could hear shouts and gunfire. The assassins were searching the building, killing anyone who stood in their way. Kyle counted the sounds and estimated at least 20 armed attackers, maybe more. They were well trained and well equipped. This was not a random act of violence. This was a carefully planned strike against the Valoran royal family. Where are we going? Valiera whispered. Service level 3. There's a security station with reinforced walls and a backup communication system. If we can reach it, we can send a distress signal and hold position until help arrives. How do you know all this? I read the emergency protocols. Kyle glanced back at her with a small smile. You'd be surprised how few people actually read those things. They moved through the tunnels for another 10 minutes, climbing down ladders and squeezing through narrow passages. Kyle's arms burned from carrying Kalen, but he did not slow down. The boy weighed almost nothing compared to the training weights Kyle had lifted during his years of preparation for dangerous assignments. Humans were not born strong, but they could become strong. That was something most alien species never understood. They reached the security station and found it empty. Kyle set Kalen down gently and moved to the communication console. His fingers flew across the controls, but the screen flashed red with error messages. Communications are jammed, he said. Someone is blocking all signals from this level. Vali checked. The door locks. These walls will hold for a while, but not forever. What do we do? Kyle thought fast. There's a backup relay on level 5. If we can reach it, we might be able to punch through the jamming signal, but it's a long way in. The assassins are between us and there. Before Valera could respond, footsteps echoed in the tunnel outside, heavy boots moving fast. Kyle grabbed a fallen guard's weapon from the floor and positioned himself between the door and the royal siblings. Stay behind me, he said quietly. The door exploded inward. 2 assassins burst through, their weapons raised. Kyle fired twice, and both of them fell. But more were coming. He could hear them in the tunnels, closing in from multiple directions. A third assassin appeared in the doorway. Kyle shot him, but not before the attacker got off a blast of plasma fire. The shot missed Kyle and hit the wall behind him, showering sparks across the room. We have to move, Kyle said. Now they ran through the back exit of the security station, deeper into the maintenance levels. The tunnels here were older, filled with pipes and cables that hung from the ceiling like metal vines. Kyle led the way, his weapon ready, his senses sharp. Kalen stumbled and Val caught him. I'm scared, the young prince whispered. I know, Kyle said gently, kneeling beside him. Being scared is normal, but I need you to be brave for a little while longer. Can you do that for me? Kalen looked at Kyle with wide eyes. How do humans do it? How do you keep going when you're scared? We remember what we're fighting for. Kyle glanced at Valeria. We protect the people who matter to us. Fear doesn't go away, but love is. Stronger than fear, they kept moving. The sounds of pursuit faded for a while, and Kyle allowed himself to hope that they might reach the relay station. Undetected. That hope died when they turned a corner and found 4 assassins waiting for them. Time slowed down. Kyle saw the weapons rising, saw the assassins taking aim. He had a single heartbeat to make a choice. He threw himself in front of Kalen. The plasma bulb hit Kyle in the chest, and pain exploded through his body like nothing he had ever felt. He heard Valeria scream, heard the thunder of more gunfire, but it all seemed far away. He was falling and the world was turning dark at the edges, but he did not let go of his weapon. Even as he fell, he fired back. 2 of the assassins dropped. Valeria grabbed a fallen rifle and took down the 3rd. The 4th turned to run and she shot him in the back without hesitation. Then she was beside Kyle, pressing her hands against the smoking wound in his chest. Why did you do that? Why? Kyle coughed, and there was blood on his lips. Because he's just a kid, he managed. That's all. The reason I need you. Fool, you stupid human fool. There were tears in Valeria's eyes, and she did not try to hide them. You were supposed to run. You were supposed to save yourself. Never learn how to do that. Kalen was crying, now clutching Kyle's hand. Don't die. Please don't die. Kyle squeezed the boy's fingers weakly. I'm not done yet. Little Prince still got work to do. He forced himself to sit up, fighting through the pain. The wound was bad. He knew it was bad, but humans had evolved as persistent hunters built to keep moving long after other creatures would have fallen. His body was screaming at him to stop, but his will was stronger than his body. Help me up, he said. You cannot walk while protested. You need medical attention. Medical attention is on the other side of the relay station, so that's where I'm going. He looked at her with steady eyes. I didn't come all this way to die in a tunnel, and I made a promise to protect curious children. I'm not breaking that promise today. Valeria stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. This human, this fragile, short-lived creature was refusing to give up. He was bleeding and broken and outnumbered, and he was still fighting, not for glory, not for reward, just because a young boy needed protecting. She had never seen anything like it. More coming, Kyle said, hearing the distant footsteps. We need to move. I'll hold the rear. You get Kalen to the relay station. No. Valeria's voice was fierce. We go together or not at all. Kyle smiled through his pain. You're starting to sound like a human. Perhaps that is not such a bad thing. She put his arm over her shoulder and helped him stand. Kalen took his other hand. Together they moved deeper into the tunnels, leaving blood and fallen enemies behind them. Somewhere above, Dreth was hunting for them. But Kyle Bennett was still breathing, and as long as he was breathing, he would fight. That was what humans did. They kept going. They never stopped, and Valeria was finally beginning to understand why. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, 3 figures pressed together against the cold metal walls of the maintenance tunnels. Kyle leaned heavily on Valeria, his breathing ragged and wet. The wound in his chest was still bleeding, and every step sent waves of agony through his body, but he kept moving. He had no other choice. Kalen walked ahead of them, watching for danger with the focused attention of a child who had grown up very quickly in the last few hours. He held a small light that Kyle had given him. It's been cutting through the shadows. How much further? Vali asked quietly. 2 more levels, Kyle managed. Maybe 15 minutes. If we don't run into trouble. They both knew that was unlikely. Valera adjusted her grip on Kyle's arm, pulling more of his weight onto her shoulders. She was strong, stronger than humans, but carrying a full grown man through cramped tunnels was exhausting work. She did not complain. She would not give up on him, not after everything he had done. I need to understand something, she said as they walked back there. When the assassins had us cornered, you could have run, you could have saved yourself and let us die. Why didn't you? Would you have run? That's different. Kalen is my brother, my family. Family isn't just blood, Kyle said. It's who you choose to protect, who you choose to die for. He coughed, and Vali felt warm blood soak into her sleeve. Besides, I told you I made a promise a long time ago. I don't break promises. They reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. Kyle paused, listening. Somewhere in the distance he could hear footsteps. The assassins were still searching for them, moving through the maze of maintenance passages with deadly patience. This way, he whispered, pointing to the leftmost tunnel. It's longer, but they won't expect us to take it. They moved in silence for several minutes. The tunnel sloped upward, and Kyle's breath came harder with each step. Valera watched him with growing concern. She had seen Valoran warriors take wounds like his and die within minutes, yet Kyle was still walking, still fighting, still refusing to surrender to the pain. How are you doing this? She asked. How are you still alive? Humans are stubborn. He tried to smile. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every day. Predators, diseases, weather, other humans, everything wanted us dead, and we survived anyway, not because we were fast or strong, but because we never knew when to quit. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also what makes us who we are. Kyle stumbled, and Vali caught him before he fell. Our ancestors used to hunt by chasing animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. They couldn't outrun their prey, so they just kept following for hours, for days, until the animal gave up and stopped running. Vali stared at him. That's terrifying. Yeah, humans are kind of terrifying when you think about it. He laughed weakly. Don't tell the others. They already think we're primitive. They reached another security checkpoint, and Kyle's eyes lit up. There was a medical kit on the wall, dusty but intact. Valera grabbed it and pulled him into a small storage room where they could hide for a moment. Sit down, she ordered. Let me look at the wound. Kyle slumped against the wall, too tired to argue. Kai sat beside him, small fingers wrapped around Kyle's hand. The boy had not let go since the shooting. Valor opened the medical kit and found bandages, antiseptic, and a tube of emergency sealant designed for wounds too serious for basic treatment. She had trained in field medicine as part of her royal education, but she had never actually used it on someone before. Her hands were shaking as she cut away Kyle's shirt and exposed the wound. It was ugly, a blackened hole in his chest, surrounded by burned flesh. The fact that he was still conscious was nothing short of miraculous. This is going to hurt, she warned. Everything hurts right now. A little more won't make a difference. She applied the sealant, and Kyle gritted his teeth so hard she thought they might crack, but he did not Scream, he did not even cry out, he just breathed through the pain, eyes closed. Face pale. When she finished, she wrapped the bandages around his chest and secured them tightly. The sealant would keep him alive for a few more hours, maybe longer, long enough she hoped. Thank you, Kyle whispered. Don't thank me yet. We still have to reach the relay station. We will. His voice was weaker now, but his eyes were still determined. I'm not dying until you and Kaylin are safe. That's a promise. They rested for 10 minutes, sharing water from a bottle that Vali had found in the kit. Then they started moving again. Slower now, but still forward, always forward. The relay station was on the other side of a large open chamber hub where multiple tunnel systems connected. Kyle studied the space from the shadows, counting the guards that Dreth had posted, 4 assassins armed with heavy weapons, watching all the entrances. We can't fight through that, Vaylor said quietly. No, but we don't have to. Kyle pointed to a ventilation shaft high on the wall that connects to the relay station directly. It's small, but Kaylin can fit. I'm not sending my brother alone. You won't have to. You'll go with him. I'll create a distraction. Draw their attention away from the shaft. Once you're through, send the signal. Help will come. Vaylor grabbed his arm. You can barely stand. If you go out there, they'll kill you, probably. Kyle met her eyes steadily. But if I don't go out there, they'll kill all 3 of us. This is the only way, Kyle. No, I won't let you sacrifice yourself. For us, it's not a sacrifice if it's a choice. He touched her face gently, wiping away a tear she had not realized she was crying. Valera, listen to me. Humans don't have long lives, but we get to choose what those lives mean, right? Now I'm choosing to protect you and your brother. That gives my life meaning. That makes it worth something. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that his life mattered, that she did not want him to die, but she saw the look in his eyes, and she understood that nothing she said would change his mind. You are the bravest fool I have ever met, she whispered. I'll take that as a compliment. Kyle helped Kaylin onto the ventilation shaft and watched Valiera climb up after him. Before she disappeared into the darkness, she looked back at him one more time. Don't die, Kyle Bennett. That's an order. Yes, Your Highness. Then she was gone, and Kyle turned to face the chamber. He checked his weapon, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the shadows. Hey, he shouted, firing at the nearest assassin. Looking for me? The assassins whirled toward him, weapons blazing. Kyle dove behind a pillar, returning fire, drawing their attention away from the shaft. Behind him, he heard the faint sounds of movement as Valeria and Kaylin crawled towards safety. He was outnumbered and outgunned. He was wounded and exhausted. And he was smiling because this was what humans did. They stood up when they should have fallen down. They fought when they should have surrendered. They loved so fiercely that they were willing to die for people they had known only few weeks. Vaylor was right. He was a fool, but he was a human fool, and he was not done yet. Kyle pressed his back against the pillar as plasma bolts screamed past him. 3 of the 4 assassins were still standing, and they were closing in on his position. His weapon was almost empty, and his vision was starting to blur from blood loss. He had known this would probably be a one-way mission. He had made peace with that. All that mattered now was giving Valiera and Kaylin enough time to reach the relay station and call For help, another blast hit the pillar, showering him with fragments of melted metal. Kyle gritted his teeth and fired back, catching one of the assassins in the shoulder. The alien stumbled but did not fall. Give up, human, one of them called out. You're going to die here. Why make it harder than it needs to be? Because that's what humans do. Kyle called back. We make everything harder than it needs to be. He heard footsteps to his left and spun around, firing blind. The assassin who had been trying to flank him dropped to the floor. Two left, but Kyle was out of ammunition. He threw the empty weapon aside and pulled a knife from his belt. It was a human blade, simple and sharp, made of steel from Earth. He had carried it since his first assignment, a reminder of where he came from. The remaining assassins saw the knife and laughed. A blade against plasma rifles. You really are primitive. Maybe. Kyle stepped out from behind the pillar, knife ready, but I'm still standing. Can you say the same when I'm done? He charged. The assassins opened fire, but Kyle was already moving, weaving between their shots with the desperate speed of a man who had nothing left to lose. He reached the first assassin and drove the knife into the gap in his armor. Twisting hard, the alien screamed and fell. The last assassin aimed at Kyle's head, finger on the trigger. Kyle closed his eyes, ready for the end. The shot never came. Instead, he heard the roar of another weapon, and the assassin collapsed with a smoking hole in his chest. Kyle turned and saw Valor standing in the doorway of the relay station, a heavy rifle in her hands. I told you not to die, she said. Kyle laughed, and the laugh turned into a cough that bent him double. I was working on it. She ran to him, catching him before he fell. The signal is sent. Help is coming. We just need to hold on a little longer. Good, that's good. He was fading now, his body finally surrendering to the wounds it had carried for so long. Kalen safe. He's in the relay room hiding. Good, keep him safe. That's all that matters. Valera held him tightly, feeling the warmth of his blood soaking through her clothes. You matter too, Kyle. You matter to me. Before he could respond, the sound of boots filled the chamber, heavy boots marching in perfect formation. Kyle looked up and saw High Counselor Dreth striding toward them, surrounded by his personal guard. Dreth was tall and elegant, with silver hair like Valeria and cold eyes that held no warmth. He wore ceremonial armor that gleamed in the emergency lights, and he smiled when he saw the wounded human in the princess's arms. Ah, the little princess, he said, and her pet. Primitive, how touching. Valera stood, placing herself between Dreth and Kyle. You will pay for this treason, Dreth. My father will see you executed. Your father is weak. He would have bowed to lesser species. Share our power with creatures who die before they can even learn wisdom. Dreth spread his arms wide. I'm offering you a chance. Valera, join me. Help me build a galaxy where Valorant stands supreme, as we were always meant to. Never. Then you will die with your human pet. A fitting end for a princess who forgot her place. Kyle forced himself to his feet, placing himself beside Valeria. He could barely stand, but he would not let her face this alone. He would not let her face anything alone ever again. Dreth noticed and laughed. Look at this, a dying human trying to protect the princess. Does it not know how pathetic it looks? One gust of wind would knock it over. Maybe, Kyle said, his voice stronger than it should have been, but I'm still standing, and As long as I'm standing, you'll have to go through me to reach her. Dreth smile. Faded, kill the human first. Make it slow. I want the princess to watch. His guards raised their weapons. Valor stepped forward and her voice rang out. Across the chamber like a bell, you see a dying man making a pointless gesture. You see weakness, but you are blind. Drath, you have always been blind. She pulled something from her belt, a small crystal that glowed within her light. Kyle recognized it from the files he had studied, a royal heirloom, an ancient Valoran weapon of last resort. I see something you will never understand. Valera continued, I see a man who ran into fire to save a child he barely knew. I see a man who fought when any sane creature would have surrendered. I see someone who was willing to give everything, expect nothing, and call it a privilege. She activated the crystal, and light blazed from her hands. I see someone worthy. The weapon fired, and two of Dreth's guards fell. Kyle moved at the same moment, throwing his knife with the last of his strength. It caught a third guard in the throat. Then chaos erupted. New sounds filled the chamber. Human voices, human weapons. Kyle looked up and saw Ambassador Grant leading a squad of Marines through the far entrance, their guns blazing. The tide turned in seconds. Dreth's remaining guards were cut down, and the counselor himself was surrounded before he could escape. He fell to his knees, his elegant face twisted with disbelief. This is impossible, he whispered. Humans cannot be here. The jamming signal. We're humans, Ambassador Grant said, aiming her pistol at his head. We don't believe in impossible. Kyle felt his legs give out and he collapsed to the floor. Valera was beside him, instantly cradling his head in her lap. Stay with me, she begged. The medics are coming. Just hold on a little longer. I'll try. He smiled up at her. You were pretty amazing back there. I learned from a stubborn human. The medics arrived and everything became a blur of activity. Kyle was lifted onto a stretcher and rushed to a medical bay. He drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of Valeria's hand holding his, refusing to let go. 3 days later, he woke up in a hospital bed with sunlight streaming through the window. Kalen was asleep in a chair beside him, and Valeria was standing by the door, talking quietly with her father. The Valoran king was older than Kyle had expected, with tired eyes and deep lines on his blue face, but he smiled when he saw Kyle awake and walked over to the bed. Kyle Bennett, the king said, my daughter has told me everything you did. You saved my children at the cost of your own blood. That is a debt I can never fully repay. I didn't do it for a reward, your majesty. I know that is what makes it even more remarkable. The king placed a hand on Kyle's shoulder. Ask for anything within my power, and it is yours. Kyle thought for a moment. Let me keep working, your majesty. Let me keep building bridges between our peoples. That's all I want. The king nodded slowly. You are a strange species, you humans, but perhaps that is what we need. Later, when they were alone, Valera pinned the medal to Kyle's chest. It was a Valoran honor, recognition given only to the greatest heroes. No human had ever received it before. I was wrong about you, she said quietly. I was wrong about all humans. I'm sorry. Everyone makes mistakes, Kyle said. What matters is that we grow. She kissed his forehead gently. Rest now, Kyle Bennett. You have earned it. Months later, Valera stood before the Galactic Council, representing her people in a new age of cooperation. She spoke of treaties and trade, of alliances and peace, but at the end of her speech she spoke of something else. I want to tell you about a human, she said, a man who taught me that worth is not measured in years or strength or power, it is measured in the choices we make when everything is on the line. He chose to protect, he chose to sacrifice. He chose to believe that kindness was more important than survival. She looked out at the council members, her voice ringing with conviction. I spent my whole life believing humans could never be worthy. Now I know the truth. They were always worthy. I simply had not learned how to see it. In the audience, Kyle Bennett smiled, his chest still ached where the plasma bolt had struck him, and he knew he would carry the scar for the rest of his life. But some scars were worth carrying, and some stories were worth telling again and again until the whole galaxy understood what humans were truly made of.